Success isn't just about strategy, it's about trust. At Bose Public Affairs Group, we put clients first with responsiveness, integrity, and a focus on results. Our team includes former policymakers and government leaders who anticipate issues, navigate challenges, and build winning strategies. From the halls of Congress to the state capitol to City Hall, we understand great outcomes start with listening. Bose Public Affairs Group.
Bose means business.
This week on Crossroads Politics, a new energy emergency in Indiana.
Just hours before Indiana's gas tax holiday was due to expire, the governor declared a new emergency. It's a way to provide critical relief to Hoosiers, is it, or a political trick to exploit a loophole?
Also this week, families are bracing after sweeping cuts to Indiana's Medicaid programs. As the state celebrates a growing surplus, some are wondering why the cuts are necessary.
And from chairman to fired, a dramatic fall for a former state senator, the continuing chaos at Indiana's top utility regulator.
Plus, who will lead after Rod Bray steps aside from Senate leadership? All that and more ahead on Crossroads Politics.
Thank you for joining us on Crossroads Politics here on WTHR. I'm Emily Longnecker.
And I'm Dustin Grove. So relief at the pump continues. This week, Governor Mike Braun declared a new energy emergency, effectively extending Indiana's gas tax suspension for at least another 30 days.
Yeah, Braun cited Ukrainian strikes on Russian oil infrastructure and wildfires near the Alberta oil fields in Canada for his emergency. By declaring a new emergency separate from the one he declared back in April, Braun sidestepped the fact that he could not extend his gas tax holiday without a special session of the Indiana General Assembly.
When asked if the grounds for this new emergency were enough, Braun did not hesitate. Here he is.
It does. It's an additional burden that you got to take into account. The Iran conflict has got its own ebb and flow to it. When you had two other issues come into play, to me and the Attorney General, as well as members from both chambers, felt the same way.
Of course, that gas tax revenue goes to road projects. The governor also said he consulted with the legislature before making his move, saying they were okay using the state's more than $4 billion surplus to cover that lost revenue.
Yeah, but Democrats were quick to point out that they were not consulted. State Representative Ed Delaney accused Braun of scrambling to make up for the fact that the Iran conflict still hasn't been resolved.
This is not government management. He started out bet on the come that Donald Trump would win a war in 4 weeks. He lost. You lost, Mike. You lost the bet.
The bottom line is this: barring a legal challenge blocking the new emergency, Hoosiers will avoid a 61-cent jump in gas prices.
Our Jenna Webster went outside the State House this week to talk with some small businesses keenly sensitive to the price of gas.
Step up, order whenever you're ready.
In the shadow of the State House.
You sure can, yes, absolutely.
A group who knows running a business that relies on gas can be hard.
You got to figure it into your costs, that's for sure. So whether it goes up or down, you're still going to account for it.
Doug Cross travels with his food truck around the state.
Have a great day.
Sometimes if it's a smaller event, he charges a travel fee.
It has affected me a lot the past year because I don't book as much like on the extreme north.
The governor extending the gas tax suspension is welcome news for him, bringing more relief at the pump.
We think that the government, is actually looking out for us.
Good news for Chef Dan, too, who says there's no easy way to budget for gas.
And the only way to have a backup plan is to have a backup savings put away, so when it do get tough, you have that to rely on.
That's what the state is relying on during the gas tax suspension. During the first 4 months, there's a projected $533 million loss for road funding. This new extension could bring that upwards of $1 billion. The state is now digging into its reserves to cover the lost revenue.
Should we spend 25% of the current surplus on a single tax break?
The question we asked an IU economist, is it sustainable to extend the gas tax suspension another 4 months? Governor Braun says he'll reevaluate every 30 days.
But it certainly doesn't put us in peril in the short run.
And it doesn't endanger the state's fiscal position.
And so if you had to keep extending this, that cost keeps rising, which means you're more likely to be compromising your ability to respond to future shocks.
Half dozen lavender.
For these food truck owners, a few cents off every gallon may not change everything,
Do what we can to keep the business going.
but it can make the next stop a little easier.
There you are.
Ooh, that looks good. Let's bring in Indiana Capitol Chronicle editor Nikki Kelly back this week with us. So can the governor do this?
I mean, I guess it can because he is. It's obviously confusing, I think, to Hoosiers. I feel like we've moved the goalposts a number of times throughout this whole thing. He and his staff have said for weeks that they were out of options, and then just boom, we're just going to do a new emergency. And, I think, look, I don't know if it technically violates the law, but it certainly violates the spirit of the law.
We heard Representative Ed Delaney earlier, but Democratic messaging on this right after, they seem to have a couple different messaging points. Right after Delaney spoke, State Representative Greg Porter expressed concern that there were other ways to use the surplus. That was his concern. Then you had Representative Cherish Pryor. She came out and praised this move as a way to give Hoosiers relief, but said that the governor should talk to the president about ending the conflict in Iran. So do you think Democrats were caught off guard by this announcement?
Maybe a little. I mean, one of the things that is definitely, a result is that this big surplus, they're basically spending it down now, not even in a legislative session. So decisions about how to use that money in the next session, the likelihood of getting a taxpayer refund, I mean, those are kind of going to be off the table now because we're going to basically, if we do another full 120 days, which he can, which would go through the election, by the way, that will put us up over like $1 billion lost in road funding.
Yeah. It's very politically popular right now, however, to provide this relief. It's tough to, as a layperson who's filling up and enjoying the 61-cent break on gas, it's tough for that person to say, no, don't do it again.
It is. I mean, but I think it is incumbent on someone to at least consider the issue of, do we just ignore the law because we like the outcome? That's a slippery slope, right? Like, could you imagine if a Democrat governor was continuing an emergency that the law says, the way it's written is it's a separation of powers issue. The executive branch gets a bite at it for a couple months. And then if it wants to go any further, then it has to shift to the legislative branch. And now we're just not doing that.
I mean, do you think Hoosiers, at the end of the day, they're trying to fill up and save money? So are they looking at all the machinations that we're looking at? Okay, this is the second energy emergency and here's different reasons. So technically they can do this. At the end of the day, they're trying to fill up their gas tank.
Absolutely. The majority of people just want to save the money, and that's fine. But there are, political issues, there are legal issues, and there are fiscal issues that we can't just ignore.
To be continued, for sure. All right, not going away. All right, let's move on to another big story this week from the State House. Leadership in the Senate is going to be up for grabs come November.
Yeah, that's because current President Pro Tem Rod Bray says he will not run to hold on to the role. We first told you about this last week. Bray has led the Indiana Senate since 2018, but his biggest test may have been December's push to redraw Indiana's congressional districts.
Senator Bray repeatedly warned the other Republican leaders in the state that redistricting, the push, just didn't have the votes to pass. He said that pretty much from the beginning. In the end, more Republican senators voted against redistricting than for it. The president blamed Bray and made it clear Bray was a target, along with every one of the senators who voted against redistricting. All of them who were up for re-election this year were primaried, they were challenged, and almost all of them lost.
In his announcement that he wasn't running to stay pro tem, Bray said anyone who voted for him to keep his role would be at a risk for a primary. He said it was more important to protect his fellow Republicans than to hold on to power. Governor Braun, who had supported redistricting, agreed.
I think for Senator Bray, I think he made a wise decision. I don't think the support was there. Remember, I've said it all along, I'm trying to do things that we haven't done before through the executive branch and the legislature that I served in for 3 years. I want a legislature that's going to work with me, not against me. And clearly, I don't think Rod Bray and that leadership point of view was going to do that. So.
The governor there speaking at an event in Indianapolis, clearly not surprised by Bray's move to drop out of that race, though to be clear, Rod Bray is not dropping out of the Senate. though President Trump said he should in a post on Truth Social celebrating Bray's decision.
Yeah, the question now turns to who will replace Bray as pro tem, and it could be Bray's former protege. Former Senate Majority Leader Chris Garton announced he was planning to run for the pro tem position. Garton, who represents Senate District 45, including Jeffersonville, is the ranking Republican on the Appropriations and Rules Committee. He was first elected to the Senate in 2018. This year, the same year that Bray was elected pro tem.
And so far, Garton is the only one who's thrown his hat in the ring. Nikki, do you expect anybody else to challenge him?
I think he might be it, honestly. There was some initial talk about whether Senator Baldwin would want that role, but he came out and said he was going to seek the caucus chairman role instead. So I saw that as a big indication that Garton probably has a lot of support, and I'm not sure anyone can challenge that.
I mean, and you saw the governor also through his support behind Garton. Would this represent a shift on anything besides redistricting?
There might be a small issue here or there, but other than redistricting, he and Bray had very similar voting records. So I don't think it's as large of a shift as people might think in just voting. Now, he certainly has a different tone and tenor and leadership style than Senator Bray does, so that would be very different.
Okay. We invited Senator Garton onto the show for an interview. He politely declined, was the wording from the Senate spokesperson. So we invite him on anytime.
Yeah.
We'd love to hear from him.
For sure.
The final tally is in. 38 Indiana school districts will ask voters for more money on the November ballot.
In all, about $500 million, according to our partners at the Capitol Chronicle. This is for construction projects, safety upgrades, salaries, benefits, and supplies. It comes after state lawmakers passed property tax reform measures, which cuts how much money districts will get over the next few years.
It slows the growth. Well, now one top-ranking Democratic lawmaker says the state can help out here to the tune of about $100 million. So here's how. State tuition support obligations came in about $98 million below what had been projected. So that leftover money reverts to Indiana's general fund. Well, Representative Greg Porter sent a letter to the Braun administration this week saying, hey, instead of putting that money into the general fund, which already has a surplus, why doesn't the Board of Finance give it to public education? It would equal out to about $100 per student. Porter told me public schools are fighting to stay afloat. They shouldn't have to wait for the next budget to get relief.
$100 million out of a $4 billion surplus is not a lot of money. And we just want those dollars to go back into the school districts. I mean, you have over 35 school corporations that are seeking referendums at this time. That's compelling. That's really telling about the structure and the financial situation of the school districts here within the state of Indiana.
So the Board of Finance is meeting pretty soon, right? Will you be there? Do you expect any action taken at that meeting?
I'm quite sure that I think they meet August 18th. So I won't be there necessarily, but they have the letter. The letter was given to them, I think at the end, 18 days before they had to make that decision. I would just hope they would do the right thing and make that happen.
But a spokesperson for the Department of Education says that's not exactly how it works. He told me when these projections are off, any unspent tuition support dollars automatically have to revert to the state's general fund. They said the State Board of Finance doesn't have the authority to change the tuition support formula. Porter disagrees. He says there is a way to do it if they have the will to do it. We'll follow it.
Another big shakeup at Indiana's utility regulator.
The former chair fired amid allegations he violated multiple state policies. The big decision that could have fueled the move still ahead.
There's got to be other pots of money before they take it from these vulnerable children.
Hundreds of people with special needs are facing major cuts to their care. 13 investigates what's sparking the rise in Medicaid denials. We talk to the man in charge when we come back.
Our 13 Investigates team revealed thousands of special needs Hoosiers are at risk of losing critical therapies and support.
Yeah, 13 Investigates reporter Sierra Putman joins us. Sierra, you've spoken to several families and your reporting got some immediate attention, didn't it?
Yes, we heard from a state representative who actually sent this letter demanding answers, and we just spoke to the head of FSSA, the Family and Social Services Administration. Here's the situation. A new eligibility assessment is leading to more people being denied a Medicaid waiver. We're talking about people with disabilities. Those waivers help cover services and therapies that enable them to live at home and thrive in their communities.
Here's my room at the end. Pretty cool.
Johanna Laut likes collecting.
Here's my doll collection. I got 2 in here.
Her favorite doll?
Ariel's right here.
Johanna has autism and developmental delays.
Watch your step.
So at 39, she still lives at home with her parents.
She's more like a young girl. She is vulnerable in every way.
Because of her disability and the level of care she needs, Johanna received a Medicaid waiver years ago. So her family was shocked to receive this letter in June saying she was no longer eligible for the program. Do you think it's fair that she was denied?
No, I don't, because she hasn't changed since the last assessment a year ago. Everything about her is the same. So it's the assessment that changed.
Starting in January, Indiana rolled out 3 new assessments. They determine if a person's disability is severe enough to qualify for the waiver, which provides access to additional supports. The state says the new assessments are scientifically developed and replace the old tool, which was not designed to evaluate youth and did not sufficiently capture an individual's current needs. Since that rollout, hundreds of people like Johanna started getting these denial letters.
We've probably had about 2 dozen who've gotten to us, but we're anecdotally hearing about a lot more.
Carly Shortino-Poulter is with the ARC of Indiana, an advocacy group for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. She believes the changes are a response to a nearly $1 billion budget shortfall from 2023 involving FSSA, or the Family and Social Services Administration. In making the change, the state said the old assessment was too lenient, denying just 1% of people assessed. The ARC of Bartholomew County reported the new assessments resulted in more than 700 denials. That's about 5% of all people assessed, according to data 13 Investigates independently reviewed. Another 1,700 cases are under review, which means the denial rate could climb to 16%. The state confirmed the numbers are correct, but declined 13 Investigates' request for an interview. Do you think this tool is rooting out fraud and abuse?
I don't. I think that it's inadvertently getting a lot of people who do qualify and who need these services.
Most of the denials impact adults like Johanna. She uses her waiver to attend a day program called Project Will. At Project Will, she receives vocational and emotional instruction as well as an opportunity to socialize.
What was the lesson about?
It's about like jobs and job readiness and stuff.
Without the waiver, the day program could cost the family about $12,000 a year.
If you lose this waiver, can you and your husband afford to keep sending her there?
No.
I think it'll kind of, I hate to say this, but it'll kind of suck. You know what I mean? Because I don't want to be home all day either.
The state also sent 210 denials to children, including 8-year-old Thomas Owens.
I'm not going to cry now, but I cried for 3 days.
Thomas was diagnosed with autism. He just got off the waiver waitlist last fall after a 3-year wait. His mom says it opened up a world of therapies.
He's had these huge bursts in speech this summer. Like, it's incredible.
And you think that's because of the waiver program?
I know it is.
Hey, I want to play with you.
Okay. He's so social now. He won't up and said hi. Huh.
Did he used to do that before?
No.
Treese Wechter now believes it was a mistake to focus on Thomas's progress during his 2-hour assessment. Do you think it properly showed what type of a child he is?
I do not think the assessment is accurately portraying Thomas or, frankly, any special needs child.
13 Investigates obtained 2 of the 3 new forms, which are filled out by a case manager. Families and advocates say they lean too heavily on yes or no questions and limit many answers to what happened during the last 3 days, leaving out nuance.
I felt like it did not show how the disability affects her life in the way it really does.
Why is that a problem if it's not showcasing that?
Well, somebody can say no. They can say, no, you don't need this.
Do you think that was the point?
Yeah.
Families also describe an opaque appeals process and say the state isn't sharing assessment results, making it hard to fight a denial.
I already filed my appeal.
So did Johanna's mom. She also sent a letter to the head of FSSA.
Asking that denials just be put on pause, on hold. You know, this assessment needs another look.
These moms want Indiana to rethink this new approach.
When you take care of the most vulnerable people, then it's better for everyone. It should not be a Democrat versus Republican issue or political at all.
And Sierra, you've heard from a lot of people who agree with Johanna's mom and want to see changes to this assessment, huh?
Tons of people. One of them is State Representative Robin Shackelford. She's on the state's Medicaid Advisory Committee, and she told me she was actually surprised by these cuts when she saw our report.
This is not a political issue. When I saw the article, I didn't know that FSSA was doing this. So I don't think all of our legislators actually know that people with disabilities are getting kicked off the program and how they're getting kicked off the program and why they're getting kicked off.
In fact, she sent this letter to the head of FSSA telling him she is concerned and asking the agency for 3 actions. First, to pause denials and reductions in services. Second, an audit of the new assessment tools used to determine if someone qualifies. And third, for the agency to be more transparent about the appeals process.
So have you heard from FSSA if they plan to take any of these actions?
You know, we just spoke to the head, the secretary of FSSA, Mitch Robe, late last week. Here's part of our conversation. We have a state lawmaker calling on FSSA to pause those denials. Are you considering that?
We are not considering that. The denial rate has gone from 0.02% to 6%. There are appeals opportunities that exist and that members or people who think they've been denied incorrectly can pursue.
And we spoke after a budget presentation where they announced the denial rate is now up to 6%. And he actually said that FSSA expected to deny even more people than this.
So they expected to deny even more. Okay. Nikki Kelly, the Indiana Capital Chronicle, has also covered this issue.
Yeah, obviously hers was focused on this new assessment tool. Ours was a little more broad-based on just how many people on all the different Medicaid programs have been, kicked off for various reasons in the past year. And what we found is the largest percentage are getting renewed. The second largest percentage are getting kicked off for non-compliance, which is a very wide kind of catch-all thing for they didn't return a form or they were a day late or, and eventually most of these people get back on. But, it's weeks and months of fighting through this sort of paperwork bureaucracy to do it.
And these are some families already overextended, right?
Absolutely.
So FSSA spent all day Thursday talking about its budget and work. What struck you the most?
I mean, obviously, timing-wise, for us to show all these real stories of people who are struggling after they get kicked off Medicaid. And it's not only just that individual who's impacted, it's also the local hospitals who are getting deluged, it's their health. And then the next day we get this great, presentation about they've saved all this money and returned $300 million to the general fund. They're causally related. And of course, we understand that the Medicaid costs are very high and they've been growing because medical costs in general have been growing, just like we've all seen in our own lives. But, you know, there's got to be a balance between kicking people off to save money and making sure that if they do meet these income guidelines, they're allowed to have these services.
What struck you, Sierra?
I think that surplus, we're talking about $310 million, and a lot of families see that and they're like, we're losing services right now. I understand you want us to be in the black, and I think everyone wants state agencies to be in the black, but a lot of families, it just didn't sit right with them that the surplus was so large.
So they're feeling like it's on their backs, right?
Exactly. And that's what they're telling me. The other thing that struck me was that the state said multiple times that these new assessments were not being decided. The final determination wasn't by AI, that real people were actually making that final determination. But a lot of families tell me they have concerns that there's still some type of computer mechanism that is leading to these denials, whether it's an algorithm and not quite AI. So that's the other thing that struck me.
All right. Thanks for staying on top of it, both of you. Great work. Important.
Yeah, absolutely.
We should mention there's a Medicaid advisory committee coming up this week. Representative Shackelford's asked the FSSA to provide an update on this issue, so we'll see what happens.
And it's been a busy week for Governor Mike Braun. Coming up, I meet up with him at the State Fair to talk about fair security and the big decisions this week. Welcome back. Less than a year after appointing him as the head of the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission, Governor Mike Braun has fired Commissioner Andy Zay.
Zay left the Indiana Senate to head up that agency responsible for approving rate increases for utilities. He was demoted after approving a $71 million rate hike for AES Indiana. Then the Indiana Personnel Department said Zay had potentially violated state rules about financial disclosures, inappropriate payments to staff, and changing the agenda for a meeting without approval.
But when the governor was asked about the firing, it was the AES rate hike that weighed heavy on his mind.
It was from the very beginning when it was clear I was looking for folks ratepayer conscious, and the first thing out of the gate was granting a big increase, and that was not part of the interview in terms of selecting from all the people that wanted to do it. If you don't have staff, people working with you in the same mindset, it's better to find somebody that does.
The governor stopped short of saying the AES decision was why Zay was fired, but it clearly seems that it was a factor.
And then on top of the firing, the commission held off on reconsidering the AES rate hike decision, which had been on their agenda. Nikki, this used to be such a quiet, pretty boring agency, right? We never really heard from them.
Right.
Or about them.
Definitely not boring anymore. The governor has made it clear that he is watching every tiny little vote they make on utility prices, and he wants them to vote his way. You know, to fire someone, you have to have for cause because it's a term. And, you know, it's one thing to say, to point to some potential violations of gifts or other protocol, but the governor, when he talks about it, doesn't talk about those things. He's only talking about the fact that he's not doing what he wants him to do. And I think that's problematic for the governor.
And he was pressed on that. We pressed him on that at an event, and he came, you know, back to the AES situation. On Thursday, Braun appointed Indianapolis City County Councilor Josh Bain as the final commissioner after Zay's firing. And as you posted after that announcement, you said no pressure, right?
Yeah, I mean, all of these guys have to be under so much pressure to vote exactly the way they want, but they also have state rules and laws they have to follow. So it's definitely put them in a very difficult position.
Yeah, and we'd love to hear from Andy Zay. He has said no comment at this time about the accusations.
Yeah, look, I would be shocked if he's not already speaking with a lawyer about his options, because you know, he's not going to just sit down and let someone, you know, I'm sure in his mind, malign his credibility and integrity. So I'm sure we will eventually hear from Andy Zinn.
He left his Senate seat for this position too. So, all right.
Stay tuned on this.
Thanks, Nikki.
Senator Todd Young introduced a bill this week on Capitol Hill to strengthen America's pipeline of scientists and engineers, basically motivate homegrown talent rather than relying so much on scientists and engineers from other countries.
It's known as the Promoting Highly Skilled Doctoral Talent, or PhD Talent Act. I talked to them about it this week.
There is a place for foreign talent. They pay more for their education than so much of our domestic talent. So it is a subsidy of sorts. It's important we develop those relationships. But it's time for a rebalance, and that's what I am pushing through here in Congress. The PhD Act calls for accelerated PhD programs, and those programs wouldn't be watered down. In fact, they would just be more efficient by establishing partnerships between universities, where so much of the classroom teaching happens, but with major tech companies and with Department of Energy labs. And so the federal government would pay for those programs, and it would be applied learning. So you weren't spending a lot of time learning in a classroom or a laboratory about things that weren't directly applicable to where you actually wanted to apply that research. It would lead to a more accelerated program, and one where PhD students who are U.S. citizens or lawful permanent residents can immediately off-ramp out of a university environment into the broader economy and help grow our economy so everyone benefits.
This is a bipartisan proposal, right? You've introduced it along with Senator Mark Warner of Virginia.
It's bipartisan. It is, I think, broadly supported throughout Congress. We just introduced it, so we're still socializing it, of course. But I know that there are stakeholder institutions, Indiana University, Purdue University, Notre Dame, and many other quality universities in the state of Indiana who support this effort and who understand this will be really critical to our economy moving forward. Of course, Americans support it because I think it's broadly felt right now that we're starting to look to our own citizens and realize that we can't sustain the world in terms of various investments. And when money is short, you need to take care of your own citizens in a more intentional way.
Across the nation, something is happening in Democratic primaries.
Progressive candidates are beating out moderates. We've got the latest one right there. The latest candidate, Dr. Abdul El-Sayed, won the primary for Michigan's seat in the U.S. Senate last week.
How it could impact the national political landscape next on Crossroads Politics. A big political headline out of Michigan this week. Progressive Abdul El-Sayed is the projected winner of the Democratic Senate primary race there.
Yeah, he edged out the more moderate Representative Haley Stevens by just 1%. El-Sayed is a former county health director who has promoted Medicare for All. He's been endorsed by Senators Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren.
El-Sayed will face Republican Mike Rogers in this November's general election. As a battleground state, Michigan could be a tipping point for party control of the Senate.
A lot of eyes on Michigan. El-Sayed is the latest in a string of progressive Democrats to win their primaries this year, including 3 congressional candidates in New York, endorsed by New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani, who is a Democratic socialist. I talked with IU political science professor Aaron Dussault about it, who told me this is sending quite a message to the Democratic Party establishment. Here's part of our conversation.
There's clearly an appetite within the Democratic Party for, for candidates that move beyond what they've seen for the last 30 years. So the more moderate, middle of the ground, bipartisan, compromise kind of Democrat that we've seen for the last 30 years is struggling right now because we seemingly have entered a new world of politics, right? With Donald Trump dominating the last decade, we seem, people are hungry for something new.
So a growing shift to the left within the Democratic Party, but will they win in November when they need to appeal to the broader electorate? That's the big question as we get closer to Election Day. Still ahead, Emily heads out for the first day of the Indiana State Fair and a one-on-one conversation with Governor Mike Braun. That's next here on Crossroads. Welcome back. We've talked a lot about the many big decisions coming out of the governor's office this week, but he got to wrap things up with something a little lighter, which is the opening of the Indiana State Fair on Friday. Emily went over to meet with him to talk about the fair and more.
Okay, so Governor, thanks for joining us for
My
this.
pleasure.
It's August, it's the State Fair in Indiana, I think the 169th
I couldn't believe it was
Indiana
that
State
many.
Fair.
That's a lot.
How excited are you for this fair and for Hoosiers to come together? Today's the first day.
Our morning started early. I think we got up about 5 o'clock and at the pork breakfast at 6:30. Delicious. The day was ideal for August. It was nearly room temperature outside, so it's a big day. Even with a shower or two, it looks like it's great attendance and kickoff of something that we're blessed to have in the center of our state that is basically going to appeal to everyone, and the food is unbelievable.
What's your favorite thing at the fair? I heard you talking about the food, what you've eaten today, but what do you really enjoy most about the fair?
Well, every booth. I was in the DNR building. I love to hunt and fish, and so I spent a little extra time in there and actually went out to the concrete pond and caught some fish. Really love it because the new train track that Danny Houston and the family put in is being fully utilized, a great way to get around and gives you an option other than being behind a tractor and a wagon. So every year it seems like something's new as well.
Do you have a favorite food?
You know, when it comes to what we just had, which was breakfast that had gravy as well with sausage, bacon, and ham, eggs, ate slightly more than I should have this morning, and then had no self-control at lunch and ate a full, like, Thanksgiving meal at the Pioneer Village. I'll worry about working that off tomorrow.
Yeah, afterwards, right? So we're in the command center. I think 1 million people are expected to come through this fair, possibly this month. How does the state work to keep all these people safe? You've gotten a tour of the command center and talked with the people in charge of safety. You pretty confident about that?
Very confident. I want to give a shout out to Anthony Scott, Chris Hill, all the troopers. I've been very clear that public safety is going to be a high priority, and they've got challenges across the state. And looking at the war room back there, they got plenty of technology, and at least so far today it's been just a few minor incidents, and the health unit is right here as well. But I think this facility was built in '23, and it wasn't ideal what they had before. Now it's deluxe, so that's great.
Have they briefed you on some of the new technology?
They did. I mean, the cameras and actually using drones, so it's going to be easy to keep everybody safe and sound.
You know, farming, a big theme of any state fair. Big here in Indiana, I think 80% of the state's land used for agriculture. So, you know, can you talk about the importance of farming to Indiana, to its history, to its future?
Well, I've lived it. Didn't grow up on a farm, but when Maureen and I moved back in the late 70s, got involved with it immediately, from being a tree farmer to having a turkey farm for 32 years, and now involved in row crops with a farmer down in Gibson County. So when I was in the Senate for 6 years, there were only 2 of us out of 20 that actually were associated with farming. So it's important. It's in every one of our counties, and it's going to be the major industry in many of them, the rural counties. So farming is not easy. It's the hardest job out there. The weather's your business partner, and a lot of times the markets swing from feast to famine. So we are going to try to do what we can as a state to make sure it stays as a family legacy where it's already in place, and try to do what we can to make farming something future generations are going to want to get into and continue.
On a national level, farmers have been having a hard time. Farm debt is at an all-time high. Input costs are dramatically up because of the conflict in Iran. Commodity prices have fallen, and we have the tariffs making it difficult for soybeans sales. How is the state of Indiana supporting farmers during this time?
So you constantly got to try to find new markets, and tariffs are in play because all of our trading partners have put tariffs out there to keep our farm products from coming into their countries. And that is being hard to kind of get it to be fair and free, even and out. So we run a about $1 trillion trade deficit, including agricultural products, which means values leaving our country in a sense that we're importing more than we're exporting. So a lot of things we need to fix at the federal level. I spent 6 years there, and it looks like it's hard to remediate to get 60 senators to agree. So states will have to do what they can. And we did a roundtable today talking about all those issues, and I understand them because I've been a part of it, and we're going to do what we can to help farmers out here as a state.
Do you think lawmakers should get involved in this in the next session, and what specifically?
We should just make sure there aren't things out there that are making their jobs, their businesses harder, and that's for all of us in state government to have that conversation with the agricultural community, and we will do it. You need to understand it and then see if there is something we can do to change the dynamic. A lot of what they're wrestling with would be a market they have no control over. Their business partner is the weather, and then a lot of the world economy is not opening up their markets to our own livestock, poultry, and crops. That's got to change over time.
Let's talk about affordability. You've been hammering this a lot, talking about this. A lot of folks have been talking about affordability. A big focus has been the cost of electricity. Yesterday, you appointed a new commissioner, Josh Bain, to the IURC. After a lot of shakeups this year that we have seen in that agency, do you feel it's in the right place?
I would use a different word.
Commission?
I would use a different word than shakeup, because there were some that were just rolling through their term, and we replaced them as best we could with ratepayer conscious. Others, one decided not to fill out the full term, but I've been very clear. If you want affordability, you're going to have ratepayer conscious commissioners. And if you said you were going to be that and you didn't, that's why Senator Zay is not on there. So it's clear this is nothing. This is the quickest transformation. No governor has ever touched it before. We're finally going to have where ratepayers are being considered rather than rubber stamping things for the utilities. No other governor tackled it because it does take some guts to do it. We're finally going to be in a place where all rate increases that are requested are going to be very hard to get until you run your own businesses efficiently. You're not going to get everything you want because it's got to be a balanced equation. We're finally going to be in a place like that.
Well, I mean, to be fair, I mean, I used the word shake-up. Commissioner Zay was fired this week. So
well, that's one adjustment where he said he was going to be ratepayer conscious, and he ended up not being. So very clearly, I wanted somebody in there that was going to stick to what they said they were going to do and give a balanced playing field, especially taking into consideration ratepayers, since we got an affordability crisis.
Do you think the commission is in the right place now to enact your vision?
So I ran a business for 37 years. It always had things you had to work through. You be persistent. You get the message out clearly. I think we're in a much better place than it was under any other governor, because they never had the gumption to actually do something about something that wasn't working right.
About that $71 million rate hike that was approved, you've called on the commission to reconsider that. Are you wanting them to reduce the size of that or completely?
It was very clear. I said, listen to the Office of Utility Counselor, and Abby Gray said, you know, it looks like there needs to be a decrease. Something other than an increase was in order, because there had never been any ratepayer relief under the old dynamic. So I think it was obvious to most people that were paying attention what should have been done, and you don't have an Office of Utility Counselor just to have them say one thing and they be completely disregarded in everything you do.
So would you like to see that $71 million rate increase?
I'm going to let them put two and two together and see if they come up with what's going to make more sense if you're really interested in affordability as it's reflected through utilities and the cost of them.
Another affordability issue, and I heard someone out there, thank you for this, the new energy emergency to keep suspending the gas tax. Given how long Indiana has gone without a gas tax this summer, do you think lawmakers should be involved in that in the next session and make changes in the future?
So if they want to, I would welcome it whenever we need a discussion like that. But before we did this second round, checked with the Senate, with the House, with the Attorney General, everybody was on board. So.
In that announcement this week, you talked about Indiana being in a great place financially to be able to do that other states might want to do that, but they can't. But Indiana has done well. We've got a surplus, we've got a reserve. FSSA has sent money back to the general fund, yet Indiana has chosen for the past 2 years not to participate in the Sunbucks program that gives $120 to kids for groceries, needy kids for groceries. How do you justify returning money, Indiana returning money to the general fund?
That's a discussion legislators have to have with constituents, but in general, what Mitch Robe has been doing is taking Medicaid, which has been run poorly across the country. Hang on a second, let me finish. And we're addressing things like that. That doesn't mean you're going to please everyone all the time. If there's something there that needs to be addressed, think about it. If you didn't have a surplus, or if you're not running government well, if you weren't getting more income from economic development, you wouldn't have a choice. That is a valid concern, which we'll look at and hopefully correct it if it is needed through our next legislative session.
My question was going to be, and I didn't get to finish it, was, how do you justify the policy decision of that returning money to the general fund when families are really struggling right now, and that $120, that's
You're emphasizing the negative and not all the stuff that we've done generally to help families across the board. You're not going to please everyone all the time, but you're going to find, as governor, I'm going to listen to everyone and make the right decision, involve legislators so that we get things done correctly. And that's not an easy jigsaw puzzle to put together, but I think we're doing it better than most have in the past. And we're the first administration that's got options to look at a broad array of things.
Heading into this new school year, what's your message for Hoosiers who are struggling?
So affordability is the main thing I'm interested in. If you can't see the way we've taken on utilities, you're not understanding. We've been the only state that's given relief at the pump, which has been almost uniformly approved of. We're going to look at all areas. Cost of health care. I've been the loudest voice on reforming that. We're making headway. We're going to keep working on it. Property taxes are still a discussion. And cost of owning a home. That's got to be to where more Hoosiers can afford it. So we're going to tackle all that. Remember, it's been a year and a half, and we've gotten more done than most would get done in 4 to 8 years.
And that does it for this week's episode of Crossroads Politics. I'm Dustin Grove for Nikki, Emily, and all of us here at 13 News. Thanks so much for watching. We hope to see you next time.